Morning, Dave.
One Rob?
Did you grow up there close to Detroit? And are you kind of serving where you grew up?
A little bit, yeah. Currently, where I'm living right now is where I grew up, the city of Riverview. So I was born and raised in the area, and I kind of stayed in the area.
Now you're in the Army Reserves, but were you prior enlisted before you joined or prior Army before you joined the police, or did you kind of do them both at the same time, Ellie?
To start my career out, so I enlisted actually when I was 17, and I enlisted in the Army National Guard. A lot of that decision was kind of made based off of Hurricane Katrina was going on around that time. And I really liked the idea. Like I always told myself, I'm like, I wish I could have gone helped out in that, situation. And I found out that the National Guard was actually the way they were sending people down there to help out with, hurricane relief and things like that. So that was more my driving force to join the National Guard. But I enlisted when I was 17, was doing that for a few years until I deployed to Afghanistan in 2010, 2011. And then I came back and was focusing on my schooling and then focusing on the law enforcement career. Finally was able to get hired in a few years after I got back.
Oh, so were you full time National Guard there for a while?
So I did it every once in a while. So the way that the National Guard works is you could get put on certain full-time orders to do specific things. So I helped out in recruiting and stuff like that. But I was mostly, when I was in college and doing the Army National Guard, I was mainly focusing on college, and I'm a bit of a nerd. So I was working at GameStop. So that was I was working in sales.
For real, that's a real nerd.
Yeah.
Oh, good for you. So you've been both a patrol officer and a detective in SWAT, right? Now you're on a part time SWAT team. And so, are you mostly a detective now, or mostly I mean, what uniform you put on when you go to work? You put on your blues, or you wearing a suit and tie, coat and tie?
So I'm on the road now. Actually, just the department that I'm working for right now, I transferred over there probably about going on about 3 years ago. There was another department that I was working for that's where I was a detective at. I did that for about a year, year and a half, and then I switched it up. I got injured on the job, and I kind of was looking at different options that I had about different departments and things like that. And from a little bit of poking and prodding from my wife, I applied to the current department that I'm at right now.
Well,
Definitely a
how'd you
better
get
move.
injured? I mean, was that at work, accident, get shot? What happened? What was the injury?
So it was at work. I was working as a detective, but there was some overtime that day. So I was like, well, everybody could use some money. So I picked up work on the road, and one of our neighboring jurisdictions had a ambulance that was stolen. It was a private ambulance, so not like a municipal or a city ambulance, but a private ambulance was stolen, and we weren't on the same radio, so we didn't have all the information. Got close to the end of the shift, and the chase made its way into our city. Finally, we're able to get it stopped. Best way of putting it. This is where hindsight's 2020. Essentially, what happened was is when I thought he was giving up the way that we were all positioned. I thought he was giving up. He put his hands up. I had my weapon drawn. I'm like, all right, cool. I'm going to go to the driver's side to get him out. And he decided to go forward and try to crush me in between my patrol car and the ambulance. Luckily, I was able to get out of the way, but it ended up tearing my ACL, which is just the weirdest way how it happened. But that's how I got
Oh,
injured.
so you kind of tore your ACL when you were turning to move, and not you didn't get crushed.
Yeah, so it was weird how luckily I did get crushed. Yeah, probably definitely would have been a lot worse, but I maneuvered out just at the right second, and just the way I guess I was leaning back, my foot kind of got caught underneath me as the ambulance was still moving forward, and just right there.
So why did that move you to make the change for jobs or go to a new jurisdiction? I don't understand.
So a lot of it came down to the department that I was working for. There was no pension. The
Okay,
pay
so it
wasn't
was
the
like
greatest.
a financial and career decision rather than that incident itself.
Yeah, it was a smaller department that I was working for, and with a smaller department, you don't have a lot of the funds to do the stuff that you want to do.
Got it.
And it was really hard. There was a lot of other avenues that I wanted to go in my career. Pretty much the way in that department, it was a great department. I did like working for it. I'd spent 8 years there, but it was either you're staying in patrol or you're staying in the detective bureau, and there's just no way to move in that department, unfortunately. So
Is it a demotion to go from detective to patrol again, or am I getting caught up in what I see in the movies?
I think it depends on the department. I know a lot of places like the bigger to play the departments, kind of like a Detroit or New York or stuff like that. Being a detective is looked at as a promotion. Kind of where we're at, especially we're the place that I was working in, the current department that I'm working for, it is a position that you do apply for, but you're essentially I don't want to say contracted, but it's a position for a few years at the very least. So, if you don't want to stay in that position anymore, you want to move around, do a couple of different things, you don't have to have the rest of your career in that position if you don't want to. Some guys do, some guys don't. For me, I like being on the road. I like actually being out there dealing with the situations and things of that nature. Got into the detective bureau mainly because I just wanted to switch it up a little bit, and it helped me out with my job going back on the road, looking at things a little bit differently than, a kid coming out of the academy saying, okay, hey, we're going to, you know, pull everybody over, rip them out of the car, do all this fun stuff because it looks cool on TV and movies. But then there's a lot more other things there to it that a lot of the guys that I've seen, and even when I switched departments, that they've been on the road for 10, 12 years and have no idea how to handle certain situations. I'm like, well, let me explain and let me show you because I've got that experience.
So do you like patrol work better, or detective work, or what?
Personally, I like patrol work better.
Why?
I I'm a really big guy in getting drunks off the road. I really like taking people to jail that are drunk and driving. That was actually one of the things that I'm what's called a drug recognition expert. So it is another way of detecting not just alcohol in people's systems, but understanding that different drugs and how that affects the people's bodies. So the 7 different drug types, you got your stimulants, your depressants, different things like that, and how it actually affects people's bodies that most law enforcement officers don't get a chance to actually train in. It's usually, I only see drunk driving and that's it. I don't know how to handle everything else. Well, there's a lot of different things that are out there. Obviously, you got your illegal drugs, but you also have your prescription drugs that affect the body in the way that you can't operate a vehicle. We've gotten a
This is
lot
like
of
a special course you went to, I guess.
yeah, so it's a national course that everybody all across the nation can get to, and it's the same standard everywhere. So the same standard that in the state of Michigan is the same standard in Montana, in California, in Florida. It's all the same standard.
As part of the course, did you get to try any of the drugs to see how they affected you?
No, luckily we don't get to try the drugs, which is a good thing. But what was really cool about it is part of the training is there's 2 weeks of classroom work, pretty intensive, just getting in there, learning how everything affects the body, taking blood pressures, kind of doing some stuff that CNAs would do, nursing assistants. And then moving on to a couple weeks later, we actually went down to Jacksonville, Florida, and we did these investigations on people that were actually under the influence of different drugs, opioids, stimulants, cocaine, meth. They would never get in trouble for it because they were coming in to help us. It's a program that's set up
Got it.
that
Got it.
so while I don't get to see the effects on them personally, I got to see them with other people that I'd be doing these, getting the blood pressures, looking at their mouths, a little nasty sometimes, but it was a great way to actually put it into the field.
So what is a sign of meth?
So one of the things with meth is considered a central nervous system stimulant. So essentially what it's going to do is it's going to jack everything up. So your blood pressure is going to go up, your heart rate's going to go up, your temperature is going to go up. It won't necessarily do anything for your eyes or your pupils or anything like that, but it may react to light a little bit faster. But one of the biggest stuff is your heart rate. Not only that, it's just kind of the mannerisms of some people too. What you'll see them is they're just moving a lot. Personally, I do like to talk with my hands, so I'm kind of moving my hands around, but there are people that they're all over the place. You're just like, you need to take a minute, just stop so we can talk. They'll go off on different types of tangents. You'll ask them one question and they'll start talking about it and then veer off into something else. They're just talking a mile a minute and you're just like, you need to slow down. So the way I look at it is someone that's hyped up on caffeine to the millionth degree.
Okay, go back to one of your DUI pullovers where you got somebody who was drunk, and let's say this person isn't like the movie Drunk, but perhaps somebody older, somebody driving a nice car, looks well educated, mom or a 40-year-old executive. Go back to one of those where you got one of these people and they try to talk them way out of it. What was that like? How did that go?
So since I've been doing it for almost about 12 years now, I'm at the point in my life where I'm going to do my job. I've always said to myself, I'm going to do my job, especially when it comes to drunks. I don't care that you're the 21-year-old kid, that this is your first night that you went out, and you made a dumb decision and you got pulled over now and you're dealing with it. because all that stuff can get worked out in court. The courts can help you out and not screw you over. But my job is to make sure that not only are you, the drunk driver, safe, but everybody else that's on the road and myself, that we're all safe.
Well, hang on a second. You say you've got to that point now. Have there been times in the past when you first starting out that you listen to that story and make sure they got home safe and let them go?
So not necessarily were they my cases, but I would always, I'd help, partners out. I'm always said, hey, listen, I'm helping you out. This is your stop. Whatever you want to do, is as long as it's not something super crazy like you're letting a murderer go, which is never the
Right,
case,
right,
but
right.
still. And you get the sob stories like, oh my God, I've never been in trouble before. I've got a good job. I've got kids at home. I've got this, I've never been in trouble before. This is going to ruin me. I'm going to lose my job. And when I first started out in my career, not knowing how, really things worked out with the court system on the discretion that some of these judges have. And I also have to look at it now too. The county that I work for is called Wayne County, or that we're in. And that is with Detroit. So a lot of our prosecutors are very overworked, and sometimes OWIs go out the wayside. A lot of people get breaks. And knowing that, at first I feel bad for sitting there and maybe taking someone to jail. And even still to this day, sometimes I'll feel bad for it, where I'm like, this really sucks that this has to happen to you. But it also comes down to a liability issue, especially nowadays in law enforcement. It's almost everything is about liability. I could sit here and tonight, if I go into work, catch you drunk driving at 2 a.m. and say, okay, don't go anywhere, chill here for the next hour, take it, go in the parking lot, sleep it off a little bit, and then go home. You should be fine. I can't trust people to do that anymore. Has been very
So
tempted to
if they
do that.
kept on driving and hurt somebody or hurt themselves, you could get fired or put in jail.
Yeah, you could actually get charged criminally for it. Yeah.
Interesting. Okay, so go ahead and take me back, as specific as you can. One situation where it's not the typical 21-year-old dummy. It's the nice driving car, nice dressed, nice dressed person who is drunk on the road. Go ahead. I guess how do you see that when you're driving? I mean, are you getting calls, or are you noticing you see the way they're driving? Obviously, right?
So
Or
some
is it both?
So sometimes it's a little bit of everything when it comes down to I just see them driving a certain way, or we get called to a crash and we're investigating the crash and we're like, all right, well, this person isn't acting right. Let's conduct an investigation. Or there's been a couple times where other people have called in like, hey, I think this person's drunk. What do you see? A lot of the times that I would get drunks is it definitely has to do with the way that they're driving, the way I perceive them. A lot of the times that, and I don't want to specifically say drunk because, impaired is probably a better term with all the different types of stuff that's out there that can impair you. One of the things that I look for is, you know, we look the basic stuff of, can you maintain the speed limit? Obviously, we all are either a mile or two under or 5 or 10 miles over. That's, we don't really look at it, anything crazy like that. But are you able to stay in your lane? Are you 30 miles over the speed limit? Are you 20 miles under the speed limit? How long have you stayed at a stoplight? You see a red stoplight and you've been sitting there for 5 different rotations. That's a pretty good indicator that someone's either passed out behind the wheel or just not paying attention. And because their mind's doing a million different things, it's a good indicator that someone's probably under the influence of something.
I mean, are there different? There must be different DUI tests for different, maybe not different substances. Do you do the same test, or I mean, you got somebody they don't have alcohol in their breath, but they may be high on something else. Is the test the same?
So yes and no. Not yes and no, but yes and no. I know it's probably not the greatest answer, but I'll explain. So in law enforcement, there are 3 standardized field sobriety tests, and those are different from just a field sobriety test. Standardized being is it's the exact same way that I would do it here in Michigan as someone would do it in Texas. There's a set standard as to how you will implement the test. And those 3 tests are the horizontal gaze nystagmus, the walk and turn, and the one leg stand. And these things have been tested for 20, 30 years time, where there's just, hey, if you're showing these sorts of clues, we go and look at it as there's no really pass fail, but it's showing, hey, these are how many clues of, signs of impairment that this person is showing. And then that's what you would probably, those are the tests that you would learn in the academy or going off as like a rookie officer. Those are the 3 tests we train people on. As if you continue to go on with that training and learn a little bit more, there are other tests that, while they're not standardized, they do help out with showing maybe, hey, maybe it's not actually signs of impairment due to alcoholism, which is considered a central nervous system depressant. Maybe it's a stimulant. Maybe it's a narcotic, analgesic. Maybe it's, an opioid. Maybe it's a dissociative anesthetic. So there's different things that we'll look at as you get more training. And now that I'm a DRE, or a drug recognition expert, there's a whole 12-step process in which I have to go through to determine what it is that's going on.
So if there's an accident and the responding officer says, "I don't smell alcohol," but the person is maybe not right, they might call you in to do your higher level evaluations, right? Am I reading that right?
Yeah, 100%. So that's kind of how it works in at least the state of Michigan. If there's something, I mean, they don't do it every single time, um, but definitely on like the bigger cases, if an officer's been involved in a crash or something like that, or maybe the crash has involved the death of someone else. We've unfortunately had a lot of those in the state of Michigan and around the area, that they want a little bit more of an expert opinion as to what exactly is going on with that person, other than, well, they don't look right, but I know that there's no alcohol. Well, I don't know what to do. That's why they might call one of us in to come and actually do an evaluation on.
You is there? I assume that for DUIs, you're looking at majority of them are like after midnight or something like that. Am I wrong?
The majority, for sure.
Okay, so that's when you're and when you approach you pull somebody over, you approach them. Do you approach from the driver's side or the passenger side?
It really depends on where exactly that they've parked, but mainly I'll usually do a driver's side approach. Just kind of something that's been ingrained in my head. Now, we have freeways in our city that if I'm on the freeway, I'm getting as far away from traffic as possible. So I'm usually will do a passenger side approach, again, depending on where they pulled over. Sometimes they're just not thinking, they see red and blue lights, they may stop in the middle of the road, and I'm like, I got to figure this out real quick. So that's the nice thing, is I'll ask for another officer to, hey, you need to block traffic a little bit for me because I'm not getting hit on this freeway.
Yeah, it's amazing just how many cops are killed by someone else hitting them. Just as they're doing a traffic call. Interesting. Have you ever had a situation where pull somebody over and they drew on you, or got out of the car and had an incident during that, or has it all been just they've given you their stuff easy?
Everyone, again, is a little bit different. Some people are a little bit more, hey, yeah, you got me this time. I'm going to cooperate. Hey, maybe I've been through this before. I know what I'm getting myself into. I'll cooperate. And then you have the people nowadays that they've watched TikTok, they've watched YouTube, and think that they know exactly what they can and can't do. And they want to play the game of, well, I don't have to hand you my ID. I don't have to give you this. I'm not actually driving on the roadway. I'm traveling on the roadway. So I don't have to give you anything. I don't have to have a drive. So then it can kind of sometimes become for lack of a better term, a pissing match between, who's right and who's wrong. A lot of the times 99% of the times they end up being wrong. So that's can always be a challenge in and of itself.
I've heard of that. I guess but have you ever had anybody reach for your weapon when you're in the process of pulling them over, putting them through the DUI test, or anything at that level of tactical danger? I guess.
Thank God, no. I don't want to say the craziest, but the one where luckily there was a little bit of distance, so we didn't have to go hands on, or I wasn't having to force him to the ground that way. But it was essentially a chase. I was trying to pull him over. He didn't want to stop, so he chased, and he ended up getting into a crash. But instead of just, listening to me as he's getting out of the car, he's getting out of the car and just walking all over the place and just causing up a storm and causing up a ruckus. And I was unfortunately by myself at the time. I didn't have any backup with me. So it was much better for me to just use my taser and to stun him that way and then go hands on that way. Luckily, I could tell that he didn't have a weapon on him, so I could put my lethal away and go to a less lethal. So that was a little bit easier to do. But I've been very lucky in my career not to, like, as I'm dealing with someone, have to worry about this person's going for my gun. I've been pretty proactive in the sense of, if I know I'm going to get someone out of the car, I'm going to call for another officer before I even go up there. It's a good officer safety idea that if you want to have at least one more person than what you have presented to you. So if you've got one potential bad guy, you want to at least have two officers there. It's a pretty good rule of thumb to go by. And so I'd rather have more people there to back me up than they have on me. And some people think that, oh, it's a one-on-one fight, I might be able to win. I don't even want to be in that situation.
Why did you go into law enforcement? Do you remember? Did you
So
always want to be a cop?
I did actually. It was very, very weird. And I know it maybe is a little stereotypical. Maybe some people might look at it as a dumb decision. But I remember when I was younger, probably like 5 or 6, and I remember watching Cops. And I saw it wasn't that the fact that these guys have guns, they get to drive fast. That wasn't what really brought me into it. Is it cool? Sure. But that wasn't what set me on the path of wanting to become law enforcement. What I was seeing is I was seeing the people that needed help that couldn't defend themselves or couldn't help themselves needing it. And I've learned in my life that there are some people out there that are willing to, I hate to fantasize it or sit there and make it sound like, oh my God, I'm this, call me a hero or thank me for my service, because it's definitely not it. But there are some people that will run away from the bad things happening, and there's some people that will run in to help everybody out that can't help themselves. I like to think of myself as someone that I'm going to run in to help someone that can't help themselves.
Take me to the call you responded to that you can't forget.
So we've had a couple, there's been a couple in my career that I remember, but one of the probably the biggest one actually had to deal with a drunk driver. Person was, so I'm working nights at the time, and it was in my old department. It was probably about 2:30, maybe 3 in the morning. We're just, me and my buddy were just, parked next to each other, just kind of BSing back and forth. And, we get called for, hey, there's an electrical pole that's on fire. Not thinking anything of it. No big deal. We get to the area. We're like, hey, let's block traffic off here. We'll let, the fire department come do their thing. It's got to be an electrical fire. My buddy goes over the radio. He goes, no, there's a car that's in the middle of the fire. Like, oh, crap. Well, this changes everything. Come to find out, the guy that was driving the car was drunk and high off of MDMA or ecstasy. And we're not sure what he exactly did, but he missed. We're driving right next to a natural gas pipeline in the area. He missed the electrical pole. He missed anything that would have stopped him from hitting this above ground pipeline. Somehow missed everything and caused this huge fire. It was myself, my partner, and one other person on the road, being a smaller department. And the gas company and everybody's like, we need to evacuate the city. This could potentially blow half the city away. And we need to start getting people out of here. And it was a challenge because it was funny enough that it was the last day of my probation that happened. And it was just, like, no one had ever had that happen before. Everybody that was working was like, we'll figure it out. But you sat there stunned a little bit. A lot of people, especially law enforcement, were like, yeah, I was there when my city almost blew up, So that was one that stuck with me for years. That was probably about a good 10 years ago, give or take.
Just because the possible was the city evacuated, or did they get it out, or
So part of the city was evacuated. I think we had to evacuate half of the city, which the city that I was working for was maybe 3 square miles. So definitely not big, but it was still a lot of people at night. We had to call the state police in. We got neighboring jurisdictions. Detroit PD came and helped us essentially going door to door, getting people out. The challenge of people, I feel like they're moths to the flame because they see something bad going on. They want to go up there, and you have to stop the herd of 30 or 40 people getting past you because it's not safe for them. So that was the challenge. But that was why it stuck so much into my mind. Luckily, it didn't even necessarily get put out. It just had to die out. They had to cut off the pipeline 50 plus that was 50 plus miles away. They had to essentially shut it off and just let all that natural gas burn off before it caused any more issues. And I remember talking to one of the gas guys that was there. I was like, hey man, how close did we actually come to something bad happening? And he's like, pretty close. I couldn't give you a percentage, but it definitely could have been a lot worse. I was like, all right, cool. Well, I don't know now. I guess I don't want to know the numbers, but I'm glad nothing bad happened.
I talked to you some other first responders, both the LE and fire rescue, and almost to a person, the pediatric calls, the kid calls are the ones that are hardest to get over. Has that been your experience? I assume you've responded to some pretty terrible accidents or something with kids.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
I've had to deal with, luckily not, I could probably count on both hands how many times I've had to respond to a pediatric death. Thankfully, not so many abuse cases or neglect cases, but a lot more involving, a child, usually a baby, an infant, that either due to neglect or just unfortunate, that's just how they were born, some sort of birth defect. Well, we kind of like a we never know. They ended up passing away. And I think probably the hardest one that I had to deal with was um, got called to a baby not breathing. The family, the parents, they didn't know what to do. Totally understandable. They're freaking out that their child's not breathing, and I ended up just kind of taking over and doing CPR on the child, and the child ended up passing away, and that was rough for me for a while. That was kind of hard to deal with. I ended up getting through it. It still is never a good thing to remember, but I've ended up getting through it. Luckily, I've been doing this for a while, so my things that I do that kind of get me through the day have been helpful, and I've seen things that do and that don't get me through it, and luckily I've been able to kind of deal with it and understand it a little bit more.
Did you get like mental health with that situation, or has there ever been something where I assume your department has some type of resources where you can go and talk to a specialist if you're dealing with something, or is there any kind of in your department, like after that situation, is there any kind of sit down and debrief at all, or are you just kind of on your own?
So, unfortunately, in that situation, and for the next few years where I was working, I don't want to hopefully come off as I'm bad mouthing the department, but there was nothing set in place. A lot of the mental health ideas really weren't out there. It was kind of in its infancy that there are officers that are dealing with these mental health issues, and hey, we could stop, or we can at least get them to cope with the situation if we intervene a little bit more. And I mean, there were situations of, hey, how I'd have my boss or, my chief come up to me like, hey, you doing okay? And, it was a few days later and like, yeah, I'm doing okay. It was one of those things of this is, really sucks. It's not something that I want to deal with, but I know it's part of the job. And I just kind of handled it that way. The department that I'm working for now, they have set in stone a good policy and a good way of dealing. They actually have someone who is a therapist who focuses more on the law enforcement of the first responder side of dealing with stress and heartache and heartbreak and things like that, and just dealing with the horribleness of calls. So I mean, it's not anything that's forced upon the officer, but even if it's not a high stress situation, you're just going through something. You have that available to you through my department to just go and talk to this person. So that was always kind of nice that it doesn't necessarily have to be a first responder situation where something bad happened. It could be, hey, I've got something going on in my life right now that I'm having trouble dealing with. Cool, we'll help you out. And that's definitely appreciated.
What's something you did as a rookie that you don't do now that was either dangerous or stupid or misguided, or I mean, give me some specifics on some of the wisdom that you've gained since doing the job. And maybe it's not wisdom, maybe it's you were idealistic as let's start with that one. Stuff you're idealistic like as a rookie coming out of the academy, and now that you're like, I'm not idealistic about that anymore.
I can't really say it's anything super specific, but I remember when I got out of the academy and when I was, getting into the academy, getting out and getting to my first job was when a lot of a lot of the issues of people really not liking cops started coming out. Body cams hadn't been out then. They hadn't really been invented, or they was still kind of in its infancy. And there was a lot of this, you know, holding people accountable. Hey, all cops are out there doing bad stuff. So we got to hold them accountable. And, it's not the case, but there are bad cops that are out there, of course. One of the things I came out was thinking that the people who call us want us there. They want us to help them. They're happy to see us. The bad guy might not be, but the people that are calling us are going to be happy. And it was weird. And it took me a while to get used to this in certain situations where get called to a domestic boyfriend, girlfriend, husband, wife, whatever the case is. And it's who knows? It's either of them that are aggressor. And it's usually the male, but we get called by the victim in the case and like, hey, so and so beat up on me. I have injuries, I want them out of here. Well, in Michigan, and it's a lot like this in pretty much every state. that if you have enough probable cause to make an arrest in a domestic violence situation, you are obligated to make an arrest. You know, girlfriend would sit here and say, I just want him out of here, beat the heck out of, and, she needs to she should go to the hospital. But I just don't want him here anymore. I love him. I don't want him to get in trouble. I just don't want him here anymore. And then we'd say, well, sorry, he's going to get out of here, but he's going in cuffs with us and he's going to jail. And that, like, oh, I'm so glad that you're here to help me, turns into, wait a minute, you're taking my, baby daddy or baby mama to jail. I didn't want that. Well, there's not much that we can do. And then sometimes they end up getting into a situation where we then have to take them to jail if they're not super crazily injured or something like that. But, then they assault one of us because we're arresting their significant other. And it took me a while to learn that it's just, not everybody's happy to see the police, even if they called you.
I can't remember when George Floyd was. Do you remember what year that was, or how far are you in your career?
I was probably at
Look it
least a
up, I
good
guess.
5 years into it, maybe 5 or 6 years. Let's see, that was back probably 2020, give or take. So it's like 6 or 7 years into it, I believe, in my career.
Describe to me the impact, that and all the stuff that came out of it. I mean, you're in the suburb of Detroit. I mean, you don't got to go through. You can just go bullet point. I remember this. Remember this. Remember this. Remember this. I mean, some of the impact that kind of had on you as an individual, and then your department and your colleagues.
So luckily enough, the department that I was working at the time when all these things were going down, the city was really diverse. It wasn't just hey, it's all African American, it's all white, it's
You
all
mean in the
Arabic.
department, the officers?
The citizens, not
Oh, the
necessarily the
citizens.
officers,
Okay,
but the citizens. And that was the
got it.
biggest
Got
thing,
it.
is there were just a lot of people that actually loved us. It was probably at least a good 90% of people that loved us. They're like, hey, we're glad you're here. We want you guys to be here because you guys are helping make this city at least a little bit better. But then we'd get people that, I mean, I'd go to a situation that they themselves caused, being disorderly, I'm not getting my way type of a situation. And we would get called there, and they see me as being a white officer, and they may be not a white person, maybe a white person. And, the first thing is, oh, you're a racist. Screw you. All my hands are up. You're going to shoot me. Don't shoot me. This, that, and the other things. Like, that's not what's going on here. Like, I get it. This is, the George Floyd incident is very highly publicized. I'll be one of the first people to say that what happened there should never have happened. That officer was wrong for what he did, 100%. And you won't get any disagreement from me. But that's not how every incident occurs. That's not what happens in every incident. And that's just a crazy outlier of all the police incidences that happen in this country. And so it was this idea of, okay, well, every cop is bad, even if it was an African American cop. They became a traitor to people, and they, I think they had it probably even worse than someone like me did, because they're being called a traitor to their
Did
people,
you
and it
see
was
that
just
happen
horrible.
to one of the other patrolmen or officers who was African American?
Not personally, but
Okay,
I would see things,
got it. Yeah.
being close to Detroit and everything like that, just kind of seeing it happen. There were a lot of protests in Detroit. My city had a protest. The city that I currently work for had a huge protest. And, it was, the crazy thing was, the person that led the protest in our city, not a bad person in any way, shape, or form. We even helped her. There was a situation to where it was a domestic situation. She could have died. You know, police department and the fire department, we saved her life and her unborn child's life, and still led a thing against us. And it was like, cool, we just, we do things for you. And this is the thanks that we get, is you think that we're here to just kill everybody.
There's been some research. I'd have to bring it up here. I guess I could maybe look, but on the effect of whether it be the sentiment you just said that you didn't feel appreciated, or definitely a pullback from law enforcement in the sense that I'm being watched all the time. I don't know what I can do. I don't want to be brought up on charges. In other words, and so a lot of you, there was just a pullback on enforcement significantly from especially patrol officers. And then I haven't seen the data. I need to look it up, and a corresponding result in increase in crime. Did you do that? I mean, did you like, all right, usually I'd respond to this call and be a little more aggressive. Now I'm going to, pull back a little bit. You probably saw that in your department. I bet if I took a look at the stats, maybe the calls went down after. Go ahead, or
Probably
responses,
I
arrests.
could, yeah, I could see that. A lot of it came down to, and I kind of mentioned it before, a lot of it was liability.
Right.
What's the liability that our department's going to have to deal with, and not specifically our department, but just in general. Okay, I have to. It's either I go and make an arrest for some. We'll just say they're drunk and disorderly. A pretty common practice is they go to jail. Once they sober up, we release them with a citation. They can't. They're so intoxicated they may not be able to take care of themselves. Well, that would be a normal practice, and it's kind of gotten back into that as a normal practice now, which is good in my opinion. But hey, this is Sarge, this is what we got going on. You know, we're probably gonna have to place him under arrest, so we're gonna bring him in for this. Nah, probably not a good idea. Just write him a ticket, and we don't want something to happen to where you have to be physical with them. They get injured, and now it's a liability on the police department because, well, you injured them because you had to go hands on with them to affect an arrest, where you just could have just sat here and said, all right, bye, here's a ticket, get out of here. And so we'll probably just do that a little bit more now. And I understood it. I got where they were coming from, where our bosses were coming from at that time. It's just, I didn't agree with it, but I get it. I'm not on the admin side. I know I'm one of the guys
Was
that's
there
out
any
there.
officers in your department who were disciplined post George Floyd that wouldn't have been disciplined prior?
Luckily, no. We've had the places that I've worked for, we've had such a low incident where if we went hands on, that it became an issue. It was just, you would look at the situation, any reasonable person could look at the situation and be like, well, of course the guy has a cut on their forehead because he tripped on the ground and cut himself, but it was understandable. There's no excessive force here. There was no violations of anybody's civil liberties or anything like that. So I was never, thank God, or my department, to where we had anything like that. It was just more of a, let's err on the side of caution and not put ourselves in that situation.
So, would you say there was a chilling effect, I guess, in terms of enforcement at the department? There had to be. I don't. I mean, that's an obvious answer, but it seems like it's like you just mentioned a little bit ago. Things have swung back to kind of where they were normal now. Is that right? Do you wear a body camera?
I do. Yeah, for sure.
Is that post? I mean, that's probably a post George Floyd effect. Am I right?
I would,
And
so,
technology, but go ahead.
I mean, definitely to have every single department wear body cams for sure. And it's, I mean, mainly even before George Floyd, most of your police departments were wearing them.
Yeah.
What I've noticed actually a little bit more now is you've got your private security wearing it more, your hospital security. There's a
Got it. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, there's a statute in the state of Michigan that gives certain security forces police authority on their ground. So like hospital security can arrest people on certain misdemeanors if it happens on their property. So I've been seeing a lot more of the, if we have to take someone to the hospital for whatever reason, or just in general, I actually teach up at the police academy. And one of the classes that I do is defensive tactics for those that are getting that certification. And I've seen it more and more that it's either hospital security, privatized security, that they're getting these certifications. And with that comes the liability of, we better have body cams ourselves.
Body cams good or bad
I think they're
for
good.
enforcement?
Honestly,
Really?
I think they're great.
If I was to say, does wearing a body cam make you a better cop? Would you answer yes or no?
I would say personally, I can't speak for other officers, but personally for me, I don't think it makes me a better or worse cop. I'm the same cop I would have been regardless of if the body camera's on or not. Sometimes
Oh,
I
come
even
on,
forget it's
you
on.
that's not true. You
No.
turn that body camera on, you're gonna act different if you know it can end up in court, right?
So yes and no. So let me. I guess that's a good point.
Right. I certainly would behave different if I was wearing a body
Yeah,
cam. Go
but
ahead.
like it's not like I'm going out there and yelling and swearing up at people. That's not the person that I am, anyways. If I'm coming to a person that's dealing like that's acting
Have
like an
you
idiot because they're
ever?
drunk and disorderly.
You certainly have maybe gone in a little hot one time.
Well, for sure, I'll admit that. Yeah, but we all have. We're all humans, and I can admit that I've maybe been a little hot where I've yelled at someone
Yeah.
because of how they're acting, and thankfully, I've either a recognized and I'm like, I need to walk away for a second, or I've had officers that are like, hey, I got this, let me deal with it. And I've
So
done
that
that to
they'll
officers.
you've been that officer too. Okay, yeah. Go ahead. Back to the body cam question. Go ahead.
So I mean, like I said, it's not like I've never been the kind of guy, and I'm not trying to toot my own horn or anything, but I've never been the kind of guy that runs up into a situation of like, someone's yelling. All right, so now I got to pull my taser out and start yelling back at them and threaten that I'm going to tase them. No, we try to go up there and at least de-escalate the situation the best that we can. We don't want anybody to get. I don't want anybody to get hurt. I'm not coming to a call that, you know, there's a guy throwing stuff around in the McDonald's that I'm going in there being like, yeah, I can't wait. I can't wait till he does something stupid that I get to, tackle him to the ground. I'm looking at, all right, cool. What's this guy doing? How can I handle it? How can I get him to calm down so we don't have to go hands on? And I know that sounds kind of a textbook answer, but it's true. And again, a lot of it does kind of come down to liability. I mean, I don't want to get in trouble because I had to do my job and now this person's seriously injured because they wouldn't give up. So if I call it the gift of gab, or, the Jedi mind trick of just being able to talk to people. Sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't, but I kind of pride myself on the fact that I could talk to people a little bit better than some people. Not perfect, but
Who's the best cop you ever worked with?
so probably one of the best cops that I worked with was one of my prior lieutenants on my old department. He's the chief there now. Even on the road, he was a little bit of an older guy. And because of that, he gained respect from a lot of people because, well, they're not looking at me as the young buck, brand new cop, rookie officer. I don't care about him. This officer that I'm sitting here and dealing with, I can tell he's been through it before. He's been
When you
around.
say
He's a little
respect
seasoned.
with other people, other cops or civilians?
Civilians.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's not necessarily with cops, like civilians. I don't know how many times it was actually really funny. There's been a few calls that I would go on that I was the boss. I was this road supervisor at the time years ago. And I had a couple guys I worked with that were maybe, 10, 15 years older than me, transferred to our department, but I technically had the seniority over them. So, I got the corporal stripes and they say, I want to talk to your boss. I'm like, well, that's me. What can I do for you? No, I'm not talking to you. I want to talk to him because he looked older than me.
Got it. Right. Yeah.
And that officer who's now the chief right now, he taught me a lot on how to, hey, like, sometimes you got to bring it down a little bit. Taught me, even just good techniques on how to talk to people. And the guy's a rock in the sense of he's been through so much now that he's been chief. He unfortunately had an officer that was killed in the line of duty. Like almost immediately since him being chief, there's just like been another crazy incident after the other, and he's just still there for his troops. And I hold nothing but respect for him.
So when you say being a good cop, you've mentioned the way he was able to talk people down from situations. Any other specifics? I mean, what makes a good cop? I mean, what makes a good patrol officer?
I think what makes a good patrol officer is one, you want to be there. You want to actually do your job. It isn't I'm coming in to get a paycheck. I'm coming in because this is all I know. I'm done with it. Like you want to go and be at least a little proactive when you come into your job.
So
But
you've worked with officers like that. I've been around people who I remember we did this one thing years ago. Had people come in, and one of the individuals came in was a patrol officer in a big city, and he just hated his department. He hated his job. He hated everything about it. I can't remember what it was, but he was really discontent. I don't know if he started out content and he became that way. You've worked with cops like that.
yeah, I mean, maybe not early in their career, but definitely I've worked with cops that are just like, why am I doing this? Like, I hate this job. And I've sat there and I've been like, then why are you doing it? Like, I understand that you've maybe been doing this for 15 plus years. Maybe you don't know anything else, or maybe you don't want to start all over again, which I can understand. But if you hate this job, why continue to do something that you hate doing? Maybe it's a burden on your family life, and maybe you like the job, but it's been such a burden on your family life, whatever it may be. That's
Yeah.
why you can't stand this job anymore. And
So a good the first idea of a good cop is someone who wants to do the job. Then
yeah,
is not necessarily excited to be there, but is a professional about the work.
I think so, because I think that plays into a lot of things of dealing with people and helping people out. It's not,
Got ahead.
I'm not necessarily saying be proactive as in I'm going to pull over 50 vehicles, I'm going to get 70 tickets out of it. And I don't care if it was Grandma Esther who's 80 and on Social Security. And hey, I took her car. Like I don't talk about that kind of proactiveness, but the proactiveness of, you know what, I'm going to get out of my car and maybe walk around this area a little bit, because driving past a location of my car, you get an alarm and you drive past the location in your car, like everything looks all right. Why don't you get out of your car and actually check to make sure everything's all right? Hey, we've been getting it a lot, and I think a lot of departments are probably getting this. People are just getting scammed like no other, and it's usually the bit of the older population that they're getting scammed out of tens of thousands of dollars, and they're falling for it. And just taking the time of sitting there and being like, okay, man, well, I understand that you don't understand the internet. You don't understand things like that. You don't even know how to text off your phone. I get that. Let me take it step by step and try to explain something to you. And hey, here's my card. If you ever have a question, give me a call. It's the kind of the little things like that, putting in that little bit of extra effort has a positive impact. I mean, not everybody's out there to hate us. Not everybody's out there to get us. But I think when you have a positive impact on someone else's life, it can sometimes come around tenfold and have a positive impact on your life.
So the idea of wanting to be there and doing those little things. Anything else in terms of like tactics or how you take notes or do investigation or initial scenes, stuff like that? I'm sure that is all part of the technical skills that you have as a patrol officer, but some people do it better than others, right?
Yeah, and I think that comes down to what you've kind of done in your career. I'm a field training officer, so I train a lot of the new kids that come in. And one of the things that I try to teach, the new kids that are coming in and they're, getting on the road and stuff like that, I go, listen, you're going to learn a lot of things. Every field FTO that you have is going to teach you something different. They have the things that they like to do. They have the things that they don't like to do. But one of the things that like sticks with me a lot is continue with an investigation as much as you can. If I've got someone that, I mean, probably a couple months ago, actually, it wasn't too long ago. I work day shift now, so I don't get to really deal with the drunk people as much anymore. But person got into a crash. A drunk person hit them, and I was first on scene. A couple other officers got there, and we could have just said, "Okay, we'll take the information and we'll write a report." Whatever. But no, I wanted to say, okay, they have these cool things out there, these license plate readers that their cameras that just get posted up around the city. And they'll actually take pictures of people's license plate. And, like I could sit there and I can do this investigation instead of saying, I'll write the report and let the detective take care of it. First off, the detective's got more in-depth stuff that they're taking care of right now to be bothered by this investigation. This is something that I can do on my own. I don't need anybody else's help. I can sit there and take the extra 10 minutes to figure out it was this car. Okay, now that it's this car, oh, okay, cool. I've identified the person. They live in the city. Cool. I'm going to go over there and I'm going to talk to them. Oh, wait, I found the vehicle. It's all messed up. Well, now I'm going to get, oh, you're drunk. Okay, let's deal with this. So
Got
they
it.
don't, so now they're not going back out into their car and saying, well, I got away with it now. Let me go and do it again. I'll sure get away with it again. And then maybe they hurt themselves or someone else.
What describe the biggest mistake you made, in answering a call or as a cop, where you made this huge mistake?
I've again been very lucky that I've never made like a huge mistake. But one of the things early in my career I remember that kind of still sticks with me was when I was still in training. We got called for a welfare check, and then, hey, I haven't spoken to, or, usually I go and I spend time with my grandmother, or I call her every day and she's not answering her phone. Usually not a good sign. We get there, doors locked, family members like, listen, I'm on my way. We don't see grandma. We don't have any exigent circumstances to break in the door to go check on grandma. So family members like, hey, I can be over there in 5 minutes. I got a key. I'll let you guys in. Cool. No big deal. Me and my trainer, we get inside the house and looking around. And I'll be honest, I did a kind of a lackadaisical search, and I'm like, nope, no one's in here. My trainer came behind me and just looked around the bed and said, she's right here, down on the ground in pain. We need rescue. She ended up living, thank God. But I could only imagine what would have happened had my trainer not come in and just took my word for it. And I sat there. I remember, I got a little bit of a talking to about that. I didn't get, reamed or anything, but I did that to myself a little bit, to where I was like, I could have led to this person, this family member, someone's loved one, not making it out of the situation because of how things happen. And that was one of the things that I sat there and I'm like, never again. If I've got to search a house, I'm searching everything. I'm looking, if I'm checking for the welfare of someone, I'm not just going to be very lackadaisical about it. I'm going to move the covers. I'm going to open the closet door. Like I don't want to feel that way again.
Is there a call that you hear you go on that just makes your stomach sick? Like, I mean, just in general, like an accident or a domestic or something where you're just like, I mean, the call you least like to get.
Probably the call that I least like to get is almost anything that's involving a child hurt or a child missing. I know we kind of talked about it a little bit earlier, but those just hit the hardest for me. I don't have any kids right now, but I've got a niece and a nephew. I love kids. And I used to work at a hospital too as security, and seeing, kids come in and, they're crying, they're in pain. And that kind of stuck with me. And obviously the, children that pass away, but even the children that, like, a car crash where there is a child involved. You know, I haven't had anything super crazy to where, but I think probably the one that stuck with me the most, actually, now that I remember it, was just got to my new department, working nights, got a call pretty early in the shift that crash on the roadway. We think that the driver of this van is intoxicated, and she's got a child in the car, a baby in the car. And I was like, okay, thank God a nurse stopped and was helping out, got there before us. Baby's okay. Thank God. What we didn't know was that there was another child that was in the car. We had no idea. No one said anything. We had no idea. We were mainly focused on the baby. And because the mom didn't put the child in the correct child seat, strapped in correctly, because of the impact and everything, unfortunately, the child passed away because its neck snapped. And the mom was intoxicated. And I was there pulling the child out of the seat. We didn't know that she had passed away, unfortunately, at the time. But, I'm sitting there holding her neck for rescue to come. I stayed with her. I went to the hospital, and I was there when they pronounced her deceased. And it was that was one of the harder things for me, because I like getting drunk drivers off the road. And this was a mom that did that to their child. It angered me so much. I kept my cool, but that was another hard one to try to deal with, especially because I'm there and there was nothing I could have done. I know that, but still dealing with that was just rough.
I spoke to another guy I know really well. He was patrolling a big city for almost a decade. He had to quit. He went SWAT. He's like, man, this is changing me. I don't trust anybody. I hate going to the same house or the same type of person again and again and again. I'm just getting angrier and angrier and angrier. How has being a cop changed you?
One of the things I kind of make it as a joke, but it also, there is a little seriousness to it. Is I've in a lot of instances I've lost my respect and my faith in humanity sometimes. Not in the sense of like I give up with this, I give up, but you just see sometimes we are seeing people sometimes in their very worst, whether they're just going through a hard time, or they they're going through a hard time, but they're taking it out on someone else. Suicides are really hard. We had one not too long ago that we dealt with. It was a hard thing to see because a weapon was involved that they used. And kind of hearing a little bit of like, oh well, this is why he felt like he needed to do that, or kind of seeing a little bit of the aftermath of like, or just talking to the significant other, and you're just like, you don't really seem to care, do you? I mean, this guy, you might not love this person anymore, you don't seem to care that this person's dead. Okay, I see where your mindset's at. And we had a bad years ago had a bad domestic guy beat his wife, the mother of their two children, beat her up horribly, broke her occipital bone. And like, she was smart in how she was able to get away, but unfortunately the two kids were still in the house, and he luckily fled. and we made sure everybody was okay. You are so much of a piece of crap that not only are you beating up your wife as bad as you did, but your children are in the same room as you did that. Your children see this, and now this is what they think is normal. And how are they going to grow up? How are they going to be able to deal with this?
There's this idea of exposure. I never really thought about it in this way, although I should have. You're exposed to danger and you accommodate to that exposure. So your threshold of what might shock you declines as you see. Has that really happened to you? I mean, are you going into one of those situations somebody you just described now, and I guess you're hardened to it, or are you still like, wow?
It really does depend on the situation. Again, if it's children that are involved, for me, it always, no matter what, if I've seen it a million times or not, I think it's still always going to affect me in a decent way if a child's involved. Um, where I probably get to a point of where I'm like, same crap, different day. Uh, I would probably attribute that to people that we deal with that are constantly overdosing on drugs. I've been through enough courses and things like that, training to at least understand that addiction is not an easy thing to get past. I'm never going to sit there and say it's easy. I understand that. But you try to give the person as much help as possible. There's a lot of programs in the state of Michigan to where we can help people out. And I know there's a lot of other places out there that do the same thing to where, hey, listen, we can get you into a recovery program. We can help you out. And it gets to the point of, no, I don't want to. I just need my next. And 2 days later, we're going back. And then we're able to save their lives 20, 30, 40 times after they overdose. But, the innocent person that was just driving along in their car having nothing to do with it gets killed by a drunk driver. And I think that's where I start to get a little angry and I start to go, same crap, different day. Or, hey, you've been in a domestic with your boyfriend and it's steadily gotten worse. And I've been here 10 different times and arrested him 10 different times. And I've explained to you, hey, listen, this is just going to keep getting worse. After the second or third time,
Were you
go
as a
ahead.
kid? Were you like a troubled teenager? Did you ever get in trouble as a kid, as a teenager?
Nothing to the extent of, law
Like, didn't
enforcement
get
ever getting
arrested or
involved.
anything like that?
No, I had a pretty good life. I'll be honest.
I mean, I've spoken to you. I can't remember who it was, and this guy did. I mean, he was like maybe got arrested as a teenager a couple times. Kind of street smart, and then became a police officer. And he described that knowing what people do and when they're getting away with stuff helped him identify when they were lying and getting away from stuff. Whereas if you he described some the police he worked with who weren't like that. They kind of were straight and narrow, and they were kind of naive to what's going on. I mean, have you seen that effect or anything, or can you got a pretty good antenna right now, and you know when somebody's lying?
So and that's that's a good question. And I know when I started off, that was a little bit harder to try to kind of deal with. I'm like, hey, is this person lying? Hey, is this person telling the truth? And I got kind of lucky with my military experience, which was huge. Like I said, I had a good life growing up. I had an older brother. He was the one that always would get into trouble, like nothing, anything crazy, but he got in trouble with the folks and everything like that. I was the baby, so I'm like, I'm not going to do that. So I don't want to get into trouble. But all in all, I had a good life growing up. But when I left, went to training, deployed overseas, got to meet people, before I became a cop and kind of hearing people's lives and stuff like that, it opened me up into being receptive a little bit more to like, don't take everything as truth. I can't get a job because of A, B, C, D. You can, you just are choosing not to. Not obviously every time, but then like, these aren't my pants. I don't know what that meth is doing in there. Okay. Just giving you a false name, actually dealt with that yesterday. Nothing super crazy. A retail fraud. Guy stole stuff at business. Nothing crazy. But while I walked away to go, talk to the people that their stuff was stolen, some of the, one of the new kids and some of the people that are just maybe not like, let's look a little bit into this. Uh, hey, what's your name? You don't have an ID on you. What's your name? Oh, this is your name. Look them up in the system, and they're like, yeah, it comes back to a person and it kind of looks like you, so it must be you. And then come to find out, they're like, yeah, this is the guy. I'm like, okay, that's the guy. And then I ran him, and I'm like, that doesn't look like the guy. And we were
That
just all. And all it was we were just going to give a ticket and release and take him somewhere else. And I'm like, I don't know, get that guy back because he lied to us. And, it's one of those things that I'm hoping that now, the new kid is now going to be like, okay, that's happened to me now. I've been lied to, almost got away with it. Now he's not getting away with it. So, okay, I'm hoping that's like a learned experience to where now he takes that as like, I'm not going to do that again. I'm going to make sure that I completely identify this person before I just let him go.
So I interviewed Chris Sanders. He's on the team also. He's a fireman, paramedic in Corpus Christi. He got busted at 19 for underage drinking.
Okay.
And that caused him, he had to apply to the fire department for 6 years.
I can
And
imagine.
every time until number 6, his background, because he got arrested.
Yeah.
Have you ever arrested somebody and really felt guilty that you had to arrest him? So, I mean, like a decision like that at 19, I mean, it cost him, he loves being a paramedic and
Yeah.
he was, persistent in doing it, but you couldn't have the power to really affect somebody's life.
Yeah, and that's a good question because what sucks as a cop is we deal with people in the here and now. We don't necessarily see how it affects their life after we're done with them. We may see it at court, or we may see it if we have to go for whatever reason. Maybe we have to go back to their house to deal with something later on, but we really never get a chance to see how it affects their lives. I know when it comes to OWIs, like I said, I'm a huge OWI getter. I like getting drunk drivers or impaired drivers off the road. But I also know that, okay, yes, I did arrest you. Yes, this is going to be on your record. But when it comes to going to court, your background plays a role in everything. I'm a human. I'm all for working with the court to maybe, hey, we do something that, as long as you don't get in trouble again or you don't do this again, it goes away. I've
Yeah.
always been for that because I don't know what everybody's going on in their life, what's happening to everybody. I get people that are from the local area. I've gotten people that are
So
from
answer
100
the
miles
question
away.
though, have you arrested somebody you felt guilty about arresting or felt bad that you arrested them? You may not. You may not because you rely on that system to help accommodate for that.
And I think that's what it is. So I would have to say that I don't really feel bad
Right.
that I'm arresting them at that point because there's a reason that I'm arresting them because either they're a harm to themselves, they're a harm to someone else, or, whatever the case, your quote unquote victimless crimes. Like I would tell you right now, and I haven't had to run into this, but if it was like, yeah, I stole diapers because my newborn baby has, I don't have a job right now. And I took a pack of diapers because my kid needs it. That I would genuinely say, like, you know what? I'm not even going to arrest you. I'll pay for it. Like, I'm not trying to like sit here and be like, I'm this great person because I'm not. But that's a different story as opposed to the person that's, well, I decided to steal, you know, 5 pints of liquor because I want to go get drunk right now.
Got it.
That's a little bit of a different thought process in my mind.
There was some controversy. I can't remember where it was. I went to a SWAT conference. I forget. It was in Alabama. I remember walking around this SWAT trade show, and it looked like a military trade show. There were Bearcats and all this stuff, and there was quite a bit of stuff in the media there, George Floyd type stuff in terms of the militarization of law enforcement. And so I'm kind of curious about, and there was, I remember some controversy or about wearing your body armor outside your shirt uniform. Do you wear your body armor outside your uniform now?
I do. I have an outer carrier. I think it's one of the best things in the world, and I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah, yeah.
Before I got to this department that I'm currently at, that was a huge battle for them. The officers
To
themselves.
be able to do that or not do that,
Yet
or
to be
go
able to
ahead.
do it, the officers wanted it. You know, there was the, chief is in the middle of it, and then you have your, city council who kind of approves stuff too. And the biggest proponent against having an outer carrier is we don't want our cops to look like the military. We don't want them to look like they're going to go out and force and take people out of their homes. We are supposed to call the police to help you. Okay, I understand that there's an optics look at it, but this is the now shifting theory because it's a different day and age nowadays. Concealable vests only stop so big of a round. And nowadays, it's so much easier for people to get a rifle that is pretty concealable, that can shoot a 2.23 or a 5.56, and that would cut through your concealable armor like butter. And a lot of people, even some bosses, don't understand that that's the case. And it's always been a bit of an argument. There was a armor company that I did a little bit of contracting with that, their whole thing, what they wanted to do is they wanted to make it to where even if you had a concealable vest, you could at least still put rifle plates into it. And I was like, oh, this is great. This is great. Hey, everybody should have something just in case that even if they wear a concealable vest, they can, if in a bad situation, an active shooter, they can at least throw rifle plates on. And every time I get it is, we can't afford it. Okay, $20,000. I get that. That's a lot of money. But what happens if that person gets severely injured or dies? You have to deal with more of that than anything else. I mean, a lot of people look at it, unfortunately, our lives as a numbers thing. It's how much is an officer's life worth? And some people just look at it as like,
When you started your career, did you have an outer vest, or is that come on since you? It's come on since, right?
it's come on since. When I started, I was wearing a concealable vest, and then it graduated, if you will, to an outer carrier.
One of the things I've heard, in fact, we do it in the programming, is having a big chest and arms for a cop helps with an intimidation factor. It might make a guy not do something that he maybe would if he weren't so big chested and big armed. How big are you? What's your size?
5'9", about 205 pounds, give or take.
So you're like a muscle bug fire hydrant guy, muscle hamster.
No, I mean, by no means am I this guy that's I'm no Ronnie Coleman. Let's just put it that way.
But I mean, have you noticed that the any impact, I guess, in people maybe being more intimidated by the vest outside that you've noticed perceptibly at all, or is it just you just feel safer in it and are safer?
I see real no, it's hard to say what other people perceive me or someone else as because they don't really usually tell us, but I definitely know that for me and a lot of other guys, the reason that we like the outer carriers is because you carry everything on your belt, and we're talking about 20, 30 pounds on your belt, and
Yeah,
that screws your hips up after a while.
right, right,
Getting that stuff off it, putting it on the shoulders, the longevity of yourself in your career, and the pain that you might be feeling on a daily basis. I mean, that helps alleviate that a bit, which is huge for us.
right, right. Is there one piece of your kit that you purchased yourself, and what is it and why?
There's actually a lot of things on my day-to-day patrol kit that I purchased. I purchased pretty much everything except for the carrier itself.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so the carrier itself and the soft ballistics department purchases that. I've purchased rifle plates because we are Michigan. It is a hunting state. A lot of people have rifles. Aside from like a handcuff holder or pistol magazine holder or radio holder, like that's kind of common. One of the big things that I've said, you know what, I'm buying it, I don't care, and I think I'm probably the only one in my department that actually has one. So I have a med kit. I actually keep that on my vest.
You have a med kit on your vest?
Yeah, nothing super huge, you
Yeah,
know,
yeah.
something outside of it,
Interesting.
just a tourniquet.
Afghanistan for a year, and were you working at a jail there, or you're military police, if I remember
Correct.
right, or did I got that right? What was your
Yep.
job there?
So we were working at a detention facility over there. It was the main detention facility in Afghanistan near Bagram. And for lack of a better term, we were jailers. We were essentially taking care of the detainees in the facility. There was probably, if I remember correctly, 6 different housing units with at least a good 300 people in each housing unit. And this ranged from the people that were trying to blow us up with suicide vests or that were arrested because they were, on the playing cards. I don't know if you remember
Right, right, right. Yeah,
when
I
they gave
remember.
those
Yeah.
out. And then there were even juveniles that were there because they were loaded up and said, "Hey, go kill the American forces with your vest." And they got detained. So we even had juveniles in our facility for a little bit.
What is the best and worst thing from that deployment?
So I'll go with the worst thing. The worst thing I remember was towards the end of my career, not career, but my time over there. The detainees kind of knew when people were coming and going, when the year was up and everything like that, because a new unit would come in, you train the new unit, and then all of a sudden they'd be gone. So they knew that when they saw new people, they're like, all right, cool, the old guys are leaving. A lot of the detainees kept sitting there and saying, like, when I'm out of here, I'm going to move to Dearborn. And Dearborn, Michigan is very close
Yes,
to.
like it. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, they knew we were from Michigan. Like
Right.
they like it would somehow get around. They go, like, I'm going to move to Dearborn, and I'm like, that's 30 minutes away from where I'm not even 20 minutes away from where I'm at. I'm like,
Right.
I don't like this. And I mean, I also understood that not everybody there was a bad guy, was a terrorist. Some people were put there, because, hey, if you don't do what we're doing, we're going to kill you. So I do understand that, and I understood that then, but it was kind of a scary feeling of like, right, in about 5 years, I might see someone that I recognize from Afghanistan. Like that's kind of crazy. But I think one of the best things was just the fact of I ended up getting promoted there and being a team leader and then close to squad leader at that time. It was kind of the idea of getting a little bit more responsibility and trying to actually, train a bunch of people. It's like, even though I'm a field training officer now, that was kind of like my first dabbling into
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
training. And I always liked it. It sucked because I was a younger boss. I was a younger sergeant. So some of the guys that kind of came in with me that hadn't been promoted were just like, whatever, you don't know where you came from. It's like, all right, I got to, trying to navigate that realm of like, all right, listen, we are friends, but now we're in a professional setting. Now we got to do our job. So you got to kind of listen to me. And I think that was a pretty good experience for that. At least it definitely helped me from then to where I'm at now.
It's really interesting to me how, yes, I guess society and politics celebrates military service, but really has a love-hate relationship with law enforcement. Like I've never ever heard of a president calling the wife of a police officer who's killed on duty. And many times you hear of the president meeting with the families of service members who were killed on their duty. I don't know why that is, but it doesn't happen for whatever reason. But have you ever thought about that and resented it?
Yes and no. The reason why I say yes for the fact that I would appreciate it if it happened to my family. As if I fall in the line of duty, I would appreciate knowing that there are people there to support my family, my wife, my family, and through the time of my death, if that does happen. And you don't see it, unfortunately, we recently 6 months ago or so, we had an officer fall in the line of duty, and first Arabic officer in the state of Michigan to pass away. And there was what drove me to tears, and it definitely did, was seeing the community outreach. And it was from the community that was awesome. You didn't really see it. You would have, and I don't want to speak about our chief because of course he was going to be there regardless, but the leadership from like the city or the community, it felt more like it was just a little bit, well, that's my obligation because this is my standing. Like I have to do it. It's not that I want to. It feels more that I kind of have to. And I think another reason why you don't see it and they feel like it's more of a I have to as opposed to maybe service members is because people here that aren't in the military or don't know what happens over there. And I'm not saying it's all bad, but now you're seeing things happen here, and now because of social media, you I can see what happens in California, just because someone posted it online. A lot of people aren't seeing the stuff that happens over there. And I'm not saying it's war crimes or anything like that, but you may get the people that are sitting here and are like, oh my God, that just happened. Like, that's horrible. Unfortunately, that's war. But I think that has a kind of a play in it too. A lot of it gets fantasized, especially nowadays. And believe me, I'm a nerd. I love video games, but like you have Call of Duty out there, all these different types of war games, it gets fantasized a little bit. And, you know, I think that kind of plays a role in it too.
You have a duty rifle you carry in your car, like a yeah.
I do. It's my personal rifle. That's my team rifle, and I use that for while I'm on the road as well.
So team as in your SWAT team rifle. Did you have one in your car before you got on the SWAT team?
So actually, yes. So our department actually allowed us to bring personal rifles instead
They
of
didn't they
using.
didn't supply it though to you.
So they do supply. So it
You could
was
do either
we
or.
have them. Yeah, it's like we
Got it.
have them if you want it, but if you have your own, as long as it meets the same type of specifications, you can use your own if you want to.
Have you ever been shot at?
I've been shot around. I've never been shot at. And why I say shot around is I've been in the area where shots have rung out, and maybe I've been a block away, but never been shot specifically at. Thankfully,
You've pulled your weapon, but have you ever shot your weapon?
no. I've definitely pulled it, but I've never had to actually open fire. Come close, but luckily I haven't had to.
Does your department have a give you time on duty to train for fitness, or is that all on you guys?
So they do actually. We have a gym at our department, and we get time for lunch. We do 12-hour shifts, so we usually get an hour for lunch. And for the most part, especially when I was training for getting on the team and stuff, like the SWAT team and everything like that, that was what I was doing. I was on my lunch break. I was going in to work out, and when I was done, then I'd eat something. I eat something real quick, you know. That's kind of been my
But there's no
MO
like
now.
there's no like set of a there's no like you get a lunch break and you get an hour to train that you're paid.
No. Unfortunately, no. I know one of our lieutenants, who's actually one of the commanders of our SWAT team, he and I have been kind of working a little bit on even trying to get a physical fitness standard for our department. And by no means am I the most physically fit guy. I get that, but I still care about fitness, and I don't want the guy that's, can't go up 2 flights of stairs without taking a break to come and back me up when I'm fighting someone, that could lead to lethal force. I'd rather have someone that can do that kind of stuff with me.
Do you got obese or deconditioned guys on the force?
Oh yeah, for sure. And I mean, they're good guys. They're 100% good guys. They know the job. They've been doing it for a while. They can talk to people, but I do get a little like, all right, well, what's going to happen if they got to get out of their car and they can't take their car somewhere? They've got to get out and run and hurry with a vengeance to like try to get to me or try to get to someone else. It does worry me sometimes.
One thing we've kind of seen is that you'll have there's kind of a relationship between people who are fit, is military, all these tactical jobs, and going for the their high achievement, right? So you'll get people who are fit end up on a SWAT team, kind of like you have, or take their fitness seriously, and it's just kind of interesting to see how that happens, and then people who run fit end up kind of grouped together too, and you end up have these separations in the department. It's more easy to see at a fire in the fire department. We have your slow stations, fat firemen, right? They'll end up in a low performing station that isn't very busy, and all the fit guys are at the busy station, having more fun. Have you seen the same thing happen at the departments you worked at?
I mean, you can definitely see the guys that want to do stuff, and not necessarily they end up in a more tactically driven or physically fit driven position, but I see it in more of a motivational standpoint, in the sense of I feel that there is a little bit of a correlation between those people that are motivated to do things in addition to just, I'm going to come to work and do my shift, to, hey, let me take on that extra responsibility. Hey, I want to be an instructor. Hey, I want to be a taser instructor. Hey, I want to be a defensive tactics instructor. I want to do these types of things. That motivation correlates with physical fitness, in my opinion. That's kind of what I've seen.
You ever thought about quitting, changing career?
I've never necessarily thought about quitting. What I have thought about is, after I got injured, I was like, what's my backup plan in case I can't do this job anymore? I do love this job. I love doing what I do. Yeah, certain days are better than others. And, some days I just like, I'm super stressed. I need a break. But I don't think I've ever thought about quitting. No.
You know any or maybe if you found yourself drinking a lot, any cops that kind of had or self medicating to deal with stuff and it led to an issue?
So thankfully it's never led to an issue, but I do know some officers that's sometimes what they might need to function on a regular basis. I've luckily never ended out that way. I think I learned that through the military too, I saw it with other people and how that affected them with their family life. And I was still pretty young, that I said, that's not the way I want to cope with these things. You know, who doesn't like having a lot of people love having a drink. I love having a drink every once in a while, but there are a lot better ways to deal with the stresses of life than self-medicating like that. And a lot of it is just even talking to someone. I'll be the first to say it. I talk to someone, I'll sometimes, there's used to be on a pretty regular schedule and stuff like that where I'll talk to someone, but it
Is
took me
that
many years to get to there.
like a therapist or professional or just another cop or both?
Both, actually. Sometimes I've gotten to network a lot in my career, being around for, 12 years doing this, working in the police academy, doing all these different types of trainings and things like that, that you get to network, which is really, really cool. And so I do get to talk to other cops in different places, because sometimes when you talk to the same cop in your department, it's like, I don't want to say you're getting a yes man, but yeah, I know, man, that was really crap when we dealt with it. But like, maybe I might get a different point of view from another officer that's maybe had a different idea about that I can talk to, someone differently about, which is cool. But, I do talk to someone professionally too that can help out with that. So, I mean, I think sometimes when you speak to someone that's in the same profession of you or deals with the same stuff that you do, you're going to get that person that just almost agrees with you on everything. And that's not
Do
necessarily healthy.
you you ever bring that stuff home?
Yeah. Oh yeah, for sure. It's definitely happened.
Have you ever start talking about some of the work with your wife and you're like, I probably shouldn't be talking about this with her, or is she fairly supportive?
My wife's really supportive of me. I mean, there's certain things she doesn't like, sometimes the hours, here and that there might be. I mean, she was my wife at the time, but when I got injured, me giving her the phone call like, "Hey, I'm going to the hospital right now. I just got injured." And
Yeah.
I know that stresses the crap out of her, and tries probably not to think about it, but okay, he's going to work today. Is today the last day? So I'm sure that there's probably times that that's been thought of, but she's definitely been very supportive of me in my career. Knows kind of what that entails, and it's definitely been appreciative of me.
How long have you been? It's a part-time SWAT team, right? And is it like several communities come together to form like a regional SWAT, or just your city?
Yeah, it's a regional SWAT team. So the area is the Downriver community, and that's comprised of approximately 10 different communities, and all the departments and all the cities kind of put funds into it to help each other out. So I may be, responding to my city, or I may be going to another city to help out, because we're all part of this
Right, right, right.
mutual aid. So yeah, so it's a lot. I in our department we have 4 officers that are on the team. The team has approximately 25, I believe, and so 4 from my department, and there's a lot of people from all the different departments too.
How long you been on there?
So actually, I've only been on there for about 9 months now. I'm fairly new to it.
How long was the selection? Was it just a weekend or a week?
So to actually go like from start to finish, so like even just the you do a physical fitness test, you do that, you do firearms training. They like to see obviously that you can shoot, and then you do an interview, and then aside from that, we have to do a psychological eval as well. But when it actually once you pass all that and you're given the blessing, like, hey, yeah, you can go on the team. The way our team works, it is a 2-week training event. Used to be that they did all 2 weeks, one right after the other, but they found out that that's kind of hard, especially because it's not a full-time SWAT team. You can't really take away from the departments that long. So we do 1 week where it's the team trains us new guys, and it's the focus of you're getting up early in the morning, almost like a basic training, all over again. And then we do a combined team training up north at one of the military bases, to where now we're on the team, but we're not on the team. So once we graduate that, now you're fully on the team. You're a member. You got your call sign, and now your probation starts, because we still have a probation even on that.
Got it. Yeah, professionally, it must be pretty interesting to see that side of it and move in that direction. It's kind of exciting, I imagine. Tell me, why'd you do it?
So I like the idea of being the tactical portion of things and learning different skills to help out in law enforcement. Obviously, I wanted to be a cop my whole life, but sometimes patrol detectives, they can't handle every situation even of themselves. They're not equipped to it. They don't have the training, they don't have the equipment to where they can go and deal with an active shooter, or go and deal with a barricaded gunman or anything like that. And what I've realized is, it's where SWAT comes in. And I like the idea of, being able to do stuff that other people can't. By no means can I do everything, but, being able to show that I have the discipline and the drive to go in and take care of the situation that, the person that's been on the road for 20 years can't do. Because again, they either don't have the training, don't have the equipment, aren't expected to do it. I like being able to just go and do it.
How does it work practically? If I imagine that, are you on call for SWAT when you're off duty from patrol and on duty from patrol, or how does that work?
Yeah, so we have one main team, and that team is broken into two smaller teams.
Got it. So about 12 people per team or something.
Yeah, we got about 50, yeah, about 15 people for sure.
Okay. Okay.
So the way that it works is 1 month one team is on call, the other month the other team's on call. We do monthly training as well. Uh, Times everybody goes. It just kind of depends on the situation, what the call out is. Do we have a search warrant that we need to affect? It just kind of depends on the situation. One team is on call, but we're all human beings. Maybe they're on vacation, sick. They can't come to it. Another team would have to supplement.
How many SWAT calls have you been on? Have you been on very many in the short time you've been on the team?
So yeah, actually, it's been, according to the guys that have been on it for a while, these past couple of years for them have been kind of, I don't want to say unprecedented, but it's definitely been busy for them. I think we had, since I'd been on the team last year, so that was technically the beginning of June is when I was really on the team. I've been to at least 50 call outs. And since the start of this year, we've been on 10 different call outs. We've had 10 different, whether it's now when I say call outs that, that encompasses search warrants, a barricaded gunman situation. So it's not just we have so many shootings going on that SWAT's getting called, but it's, helping, the different narcotics units or anything affect a search warrant and stuff like that.
If you were, on, I guess, on call, on patrol, and let's say there's an active shooter call at a school or something like that, because you're on SWAT, can you go in where you wouldn't have been able to go in before as patrol, or you still got to wait for the little team to get there?
So the way it usually works when the team gets activated, we all have to meet up at one central location where all of our equipment's at, and then
Got
we'll
it.
go from there. They'll wait for like the first like 8 or 9 people get loaded up on the Bearcat. We're going, everybody else still make it, because then you can show up and then you can supplement.
So you have to go someplace, but you don't have like all your SWAT gear in your car then.
I do have like my gear, my personal gear is with me
Yeah.
all the time. So I throw everything on and I'm heading out over there. But like
You're still going to the central location then.
yep,
Right. Okay.
our
You're not
Bearcat,
reporting to the scene.
yeah, our Bearcat, stuff like that, that's still there. Now, if maybe I'm a little bit farther out and the team's already on scene, they'll say, hey, just make the location. But
Got it.
yeah.
Have you ever seen a policy change at your department from something that's happened nationally, like Uvalde is the best example, I think.
So
Uvalde in that Texas school down there.
yeah,
Yeah.
for sure. Nothing that I've dealt with. There are always policy changes. I think the policy book is it's a living document. It's always changing all the time, especially when you get leadership. And there's something, I don't know if this is a national thing. I at least know in the state of Michigan, there's something called accreditation where your department become accredited. And it's just a fancy way of saying, we've set these rules out. These are the rules that you have to follow. And this way you can get some, funding for your department, federal funding. So sometimes policies change to make sure that they follow the rules that this accreditation sets out. But we try to always have some sort of training for at least our officers. So especially with our department, we actually involve our fire department in with it for active shooting training, to where, hey, our officers will go in and they might take out the threat, while other officers that are maybe showing up a little bit later go in with our fire department and could start actively helping people that may be injured. So that's really been kind of new, where we've incorporated the fire department into our training, because that's usually been a pretty, everybody
Separate.
goes their separate ways. Yeah. And
Right.
I've really liked that, because the last department that I had, it wasn't a city fire department. It was actually another city that was doing our fire department. They're good guys and everything, but there was a little bit of a disconnect, because they're like, why am I coming to this city? This is like the last station I want to be at.
Right.
Department that I work for now, we have our own fire department. So there's a lot more of a camaraderie. There's a lot more of cohesion with that. And I really appreciate that.
Do you have training partners you train with during your lunch breaks, or are you just kind of on your own?
We're really on our own. We're not as staffed as, say, a Detroit uh, department would be in the sense of just the numbers.
Yeah.
Usually, even depending, we got 5 officers on the road on my shift, um, which is actually pretty good for us. That's actually a good number. Sometime, but that's not our minimum manpower. If officers take off, our minimum manpower is 3. So, if I take my lunch break, I might not even get a full lunch break because something else is going on that I've got to, get off of lunch to go help with it. I mean, heck, even when we got everybody working, we might have to do that. So
Right,
it just
right.
kind of depends. Yeah. But usually I'm by myself. I got another buddy that's on my shift. He was on the SWAT team, and we kind of just go back and forth on trying to outdo each other sometimes when it comes to like physical fitness and things like that.
Is there a case that you've worked that you've been most proud of?
I think the biggest case that I was most proud of, in the sense that, because what made me mad more than anything is it never went anywhere, unfortunately. But just the fact that, like, I went from start to finish to find, to figure out these obscure types of laws and things like that, and did the investigation. I was pretty proud of myself. We had a drive-by shooting. It happened during the daytime. Of all the times that happens during the daytime. We got called to the scene. I know all of us detectives are working. We got called to the scene, and it's trying to figure out like a battle plan. Everybody's safe. Luckily, no one got hurt, thank God. But it was just the idea of like, okay, well, how are we supposed to handle this? There's no camp. No one got to look at the plate. We don't know what it is that we're looking for. And I just came up with a battle plan. I'm like, well, hey, I know from working the road, these guys over here have surveillance cameras. Let's go get that. Well, I don't. I get some guys who are like, well, I don't know how to look at surveillance cameras. All right, I guess I'll go do it. Then learning that most new cars have black boxes in them. Like, if you find the car, you can get the black box and it'll GPS locate them everywhere. It'll even get the last 10 phones that are synced in that black box that have been synced up to the car. And
I had
then
no
it's
idea.
just, yeah. So it's just, if so sitting there and being like, all right, cool. Well, now I know that, wait a minute, it's an out of state plate. Most likely it's a rented vehicle. Oh, okay. Where did it come from? Oh, it came from here. Who rented it? Boom. And it's just putting the pieces together. And I think that was one of the more ones that I was proud of, because I felt like I did a lot of it. Unfortunately, nothing ever happened out of it. It unfortunately is what it is from there. But, being able to sit there and be like, I did about 95% of the work and kind of handed it off to another detective, and not for the detective's fault, but kind of county side, it didn't really go anywhere. So, but it was nice to know that, like, I did something that led to an answer of someone that's out there that's doing this crazy stuff.
Is there anything about your work, a question that I should have asked but didn't?
Not that I can think of. I mean, you've asked some pretty. I don't want to say. I don't want to hope this doesn't come off as a bad way, but stereotypical. Like, hey, like, what's the worst thing you've ever dealt with, and things like that, which are good because everybody's dealt with something different. Everybody deals with it in a different way. I think one of the biggest things is, you know, I like being able to be a part of the academy and training the next generation of cops. And it's just, I like to bring the fitness aspect into it, because a lot of these kids that are coming in, they're very young. Of course they're fit right now, but there comes a time, you start getting older, you start having more responsibilities, that sometimes it's really hard to get into that aspect of, let's stay fit. Okay, hey, let me take an hour out of my day to go work out and do stuff. I was like this when I was young. I'm like, I'm still young. I'm still in shape. I don't need to work out today. And, years later, I was like, wow, I wish I didn't do that. And, it's kind of like trying to impart that kind of wisdom on people. I mean, this is, you know, we have a job to do, but it also is a very physical job. And you need to be in shape. You need to know these things, because if you can't, you're no good to yourself. You're no good to the people that you're trying to serve. You're also no good to the people that you're working with. So I think fitness plays a huge role into it.
Is jujitsu a big part of your department?
Not at all. Jujitsu is.
Do you
So
practice that at all?
a couple of the guys on the team, on our SWAT team, do jujitsu, and they've gotten some programs set up. It was hard for me to get into, because I really wanted to get into it. Just the way that the scheduling worked was just
Right,
really
right.
hard to try to do it. So there's a new, I don't want to say program, but there's a gym not too far away from me that does it really early in the morning. So that's something that I can do more now. So I haven't gone yet, but it's one of those things that I'm working on. With the way that I don't want to say it's specifically our department because it's a lot of departments. Jiu-jitsu is a very new thing. It's not a standardized thing that the main body of our standards from the state of Michigan is like, yeah, we recognize this. You officers should be training that way. It's more of a outdated, I don't want to say outdated, but it's more of an older form of defensive tactics that certain things are good because this is what we teach and I see that it can work. From my experience, a lot of fights end up on the ground. It's never a standing boxing ground and pound or anything like that. They always somehow end up on the ground.
Right.
And fighting on the ground with a gi or no gi is completely different than fighting on the ground with all your equipment on. And I think that's what people, especially younger cops and even older cops, don't understand. And I think that's why it should be incorporated more. We actually were able to get a couple of our guys sent to a ground fighting school. Don't know what that entails, but I'm looking forward to seeing that incorporated into more of our defensive tactics training and see how well that works out.
You ever had a fight that's gone to the ground?
Yeah, I mean, it like every fight or every, where I'm, and again, it's not when I say fight, it's not like I'm trying to whoop the crap out of them, but just
Right.
even I'm just trying to get cuffs on them and things
Right.
like
Right.
that.
Right.
It always somehow ends up on the ground in the sense of I trip, they trip, we all fall down. There's myself, my partner, we kind of, get too much weight on them. So now they're falling out. Like it's somehow, I've never seen a fight with law enforcement, whether personally or even on YouTube or anything like that, where it's a standing up fight. I've never seen it happen.
Have you ever been in a situation where when it's over, you're like, I was not fit for that?
I think it probably only happened a couple times because it was a little bit of a longer fight where I was kind of struggling by myself for a little bit. Luckily, my partner got there, but I was already gassed. So I think we've all been in that situation in a sense of like when we're gassed and I don't want to say freaking out, but we're knowing like, hey, something bad can happen. That makes you tend to think a little bit more. And I was definitely gassed at that time. And I was like, well, that really sucked. I think I need to do better next time. So it was kind of more something like that. Yeah.
It's interesting you said that, worst situation you've been in, kind of stereotypical question. I wanted to pride myself on having non-stereotypical questions. So I failed
Like I
there.
said, I apologize. I
What,
apologize for that.
what, again, I mean, I mean, if you or me, and I'm not in your field, anything that is interesting or just different or important?
I think for me, probably something I might ask, because I think I ask this for other people when it comes to like what they do for their jobs. Like, what is it that's different from what I see on TV to what I see in the movies from your line of work? I mean, we see, in TVs and movies, it's always your big departments, or it's either like the really big departments like LAPD, or it's like the rural departments where it's, the Andy Griffith show and there's two deputies and that's it.
Yeah,
And
never the suburb department like where you're at right there. Yeah,
you
yeah.
really don't see it a lot. So a lot of people are just like, oh, what is it that you do? What is it that you do? And a lot of the times there's really nothing to our job. Some days are slower. We may get two calls and it's nothing crazy of, hey, someone slid off the roadway, everybody's fine, but hey, we got to deal with it. To like, hey, today was a crazy day. We were going back and forth. It was call after call after call. We had this one guy that wanted to beat us up. We had this guy, that was just crazy. It's always different. And I mean, it's fun. It's funny because, my wife and I will watch some of the cop shows, like the dramatized ones. And she always gives me crap because I'll always point out, I'm like, that'll never happen. That never happens. Like, that's wrong. And she's, oh, stop. I know it's not right, but it's a show. Stop it. So,
Can't have fun watching a show.
I like the show. It's just I'll always be like, that would never happen. Nope, we'll never see that.
It's
So
always been interesting to me that how many of the dramas on television or movies are about cops, but still there's this love-hate relationship in the country, it seems, with police. Isn't that crazy? I mean, I guess there's plenty of, there's every once in a while there's a show about a bad cop, but there's always a bunch of good cops in the same show, right?
yeah, and I
It's
think
just curious.
I hate to get kind of conspiracy theory around there, but I mean, let's be honest, a lot of the good news and good TV isn't for the good stuff that happens. It's always for the bad stuff. I mean, if you ever watch when you watch the news, it's never really of the good things that happen. It's always really of
Right.
like the horrible things that are going on. And maybe that says something about us as a country. I don't know. Like I said, I don't want to get conspiracy theory, but I mean, I think people just like to see the bad sometimes. And maybe it's kind of reminds them that they don't have like their life really isn't that bad. I don't know, but I mean, yeah, I definitely get what you're saying. A lot of these TV shows, because there is, you got SWAT, you got, the Rookie, you got all these different types of cop shows that, hey, cops are good people, but yet you see so much hate towards cops. That's it's a good thought. I never really kind of thought about that.
Have you ever had you reply to a call where it was like a suicide by cop, where guys
That
wanted you to shoot him?
I mean, I've had guys that have come out that I've drawn my weapons on that they're like, shoot me, like F you, cop, F you, shoot me. Like, some stuff like that. It's never gotten to that situation. I have had calls that we've got to that the person did commit suicide themselves, but we think it was maybe more of a they wanted a suicide by cop. And I think that one of them, our more recent cases about a month ago, was kind of like that. We think that's the way that he wanted to go. Didn't really, I guess he changed his mind and took his own life. It's horrible that that had to happen, but we think that's kind of where his thought process was.
Has your department done anything in terms of attaching a social worker with the cops when you go out? Or is there like a social worker job? I saw that some cities were doing that.
So we have something that's not like that, but kind of. So what we have is something, it's a program that we work with social workers in our area that work kind of the downriver area.
Yeah,
And what we have we have iPads. And essentially we're like, hey, if you're going through an episode or you're going through something that you'd like to talk to a social worker, here we go. We'll give you this iPad and you can link to one 24/7. There's always an on-call one. You just hit this button and it'll link you to a social worker. And sometimes that's helped. Sometimes it hasn't.
I guess when maybe I misunderstood my question, I misunderstood your answer. So that's like you get a call from a domestic, and with you replying on patrol is a social worker to help handle the call.
Yeah. So I mean, if we
So
recognize,
go ahead.
oh, I'm sorry, no, but I mean, if we realize that it's more of a mental issue, not so much a criminal issue, but it is more of a mental issue
Yeah,
that's going on. We have that option to us that we all, a couple of us on the road will carry these iPads that link
got
to
it.
a social worker.
So you can give the iPad to the person who's
Yeah.
got it. Okay,
And we'll usually walk away. They'll go into another room. Well, we'll be like in the next room over because, hey, listen, this is your personal stuff. We don't need to know about it. But if you
got it.
want help, like there you go. We're giving you that option.
Has your SWAT team that you know of ever been called out in one of them swatting incidents we hear about?
Yeah. It's funny enough. It was in the old department that I was working with.
Yeah,
I was the boss of that shift. It was New Year's Eve, and there was an incident of like, hey, I have my girlfriend and her family hostage. I have, like a stereotypical thing that you've heard in like the movies. I've got them hostage. I've got pipe bombs. I want to speak to a negotiator. And I'm like, okay. I wasn't on the team at that time, but I was just like the boss of the shift. Just they got called in. We did what we had to do. Come to find out, it was fake. It was a swatting incident. Guy fled the country, and charges weren't pursued, unfortunately. So luckily, no one got hurt. It was cold that night, but no one got hurt. Everybody was okay. It was a very interesting situation.
you show up the house and these people are going, "What are you doing here?"
It was funny enough that what I've told you earlier, when like sometimes officers, if they're showing up a little bit later, they may show up in their personal vehicles, but all ready to go. I think what happened was it was actually a person that was living at the house. They just weren't there. They're like, all right, well, there's cops blocking around. I'm just going to follow this car. And they pulled up into the driveway and we're like, wait a minute, what's going on? And that's kind of how we learned that there was absolutely nothing going on, was
Got it.
because everybody came out. We unfortunately had to call everybody out of the house. They thought, they're like, what is going on? And it was like, no, we have no idea what's going, and again, like, no, I don't have a boyfriend. No, I don't have this. Like, what is happening? And so
Is marijuana legal in Mexico?
it is recreationally, it is legal as long as you're 21 or older. And it kind of carries the same restrictions as alcohol. As long as you're not operating a vehicle under the influence or you're not being disorderly out in public, you can't You can't go around walking down the public smoking a joint or anything like that, as you couldn't drink alcohol like that. It pretty much is the same sort of laws as how it's equated to now.
Can cops on your department use marijuana recreationally?
So they do not allow us to.
You're drug tested. You're piss tested then.
We aren't a yearly or anything like that. Mainly is if they believe that there's something going on,
Got
and
it.
we haven't really had that as an issue, thankfully. And I'll be honest, I don't care about marijuana. I mean, there is good and bad to it, just like anything
Right,
that's
right,
out
right.
there. There's good and bad to it. My whole thing is hey, as long as you're not out driving around while you're impaired by it, okay, go ahead. Don't give it to a little kid. That's kind of how I look. If you're an adult and you say, hey, I want to take an edible or I want to smoke a little weed, do it in your house, and when you're done, and if you're happy, cool. Now you can go out in the world and go to CVS and get some munchies. And cool. That's great. Just keep it to yourself, type of a thing.
Is there a breathalyzer equivalent for marijuana yet?
So unfortunately, no, but there is something that a couple of the officers in the state were doing some sort of a field testing for, and it was more of like a oral test, kind of like they take a Q-tip, they swab the inside of your mouth, and it would show whether it was like positive or negative. It wouldn't tell you how much, but it would say yes, it's positive for this type of a substance, or positive for that type of a substance, or negative. So it was field tested years ago, and we haven't gotten anything new about that. No.
You were chief of police tomorrow for your department. What's one policy change you'd make?
Well, first off, I'll say if I found out that I was chief tomorrow, I'd demote myself so I wouldn't have to be the chief. But I think a lot of it. So I don't think any of our handwritten policies are bad per se. So I don't really think that there's anything right off the top of my head that I could sit here and say like, oh, this is getting changed tomorrow. Other than I'd open the idea of like a uniform policy, like our uniform policy, not say, hey, we should be able to gauge our ears or have long, like nothing crazy like that. But, it specifically states you are only supposed to wear this brand, and it's like the old school brand of uniform that's been around for years. And it's like, well, why should we change it? It's worked. And even though that there's better, why change it? The vest that we wear, like I said, it's great for concealable. It's soft armor, but we have a lot of rifles that are owned by people. We need to look on, upping that kind of protection for our officers, getting training on it. I know a lot of guys don't understand the fact that you get what's they call as a trauma plate, and it's just like a little maybe 4x8 little plate that goes in there, and they all think that it covers your heart, and they all think that, oh, that protects me against rifle rounds. Like, no, it doesn't. Like
Right,
you
right.
you have no protection. And kind of educating the cops a little bit more, because our new cops are hearing from the old cops what's going on, and they're like, well, I take that as gospel. And it's like, that's really not the truth. So I think I would want to open up looking into other avenues of equipment and protection, not just sitting there and going to the idea of, well, it's worked for us for the past 15, 20 years, so it'll continue to work for us for the next 10 to 15 years. Technology's changing all the time, and sometimes you need to move with it. You got to pick and choose your battles. I know, I don't have unlimited, I wouldn't have unlimited funds, but picking and choosing the battles of, okay, this is the most important thing. Let's focus on maybe getting some new equipment first. Oh, hey, the rifles that we have are 20 some years old. Yeah, they work now, but we might want to update them.
I remember that terrorist attack in San Bernardino between the Arab guy and his wife, and I think they went to like his one of their workspaces during a Christmas party and shot a bunch of people up. If you look at the pictures from that, a lot of the patrol officers had long rifles in their vehicles, but they were like mini 14s with iron sights, right? And compared to, and it was just like, oh my god, outgunned, kind of really simple technology.
Yeah.
And I do know that in the military, on the military side, with the forever wars, whole new industry, started like Cry Precision with their, Cry Precision uniforms and stuff like that. I know that some of that has moved over to the law enforcement side too. More and more companies are developing better fitting pants, materials. So it's kind of disappointing that you're stuck to, just buy one brand or whatever.
It is unfortunate. I do understand the whole like, hey, we're sticking because we want uniformity. We don't want me to go out there and then my partner to go out there and we look like two completely different guys from the same department. I
Right,
get
right.
that. Totally understand that. Coming from the military background, uniformity, totally get it. But, there's better equipment, better brands that are out there that it's not looked at. And what the funny thing is, the older stuff, the stuff that's in our policy is more expensive than the newer and better stuff.
Really,
Yeah,
it's just not spending.
yeah. So, instead of $50 for a pair of pants, I'm spending $85 on a pair of pants because, well, that's what the policy says. And that won't last.
The other day I saw a guy, and I think he was like a business owner, young guy, probably 30 years old or so, late 20s. Had some of them, them earrings that kind of make your ear bigger, your earlobe bigger and bigger
Yeah.
and bigger.
Yep.
He was
Yep.
a white
Gauge
guy,
them.
and
Yeah.
he had like quarters in his ears, and he had some tattoos, and it's pretty common these days. I mean, what is the like tattoo piercings policy for your department? Is it like none, jewelry, any of that stuff?
So thankfully, the tattoo policy it's a little bit more lax in the sense of you could have tattoos that show in like a short sleeve uniform. Nothing on the neck, nothing on the face, nothing on the hands.
Yeah,
But if you have them on your arms, as long as it's nothing derogatory or anything like that, you can't have swastikas, you can't have people being decapitated, like you can't have anything like that.
right.
When it comes to jewelry, mainly it's the females. If you wear earrings, wear studs. You're not wearing those big hoop earrings. I've never had anybody. So my brother gauged his ears, not super crazy, but like a while ago when he was young, and he's 7 years older than me. So like
Right.
it was
I guess
back
I'm
in its
just wondering
infancy.
if you're seeing changes where that stuff might be allowed at departments.
Actually, yeah, and I remember this one. So the academy that I helped train at
Yeah.
take people from all over the place, even different counties, and hey, they get sponsored by their departments. Like, hey, we want to send them to your academy. Great. They have a policy on how you're going to conduct yourself. The grooming standards, same thing. And one of the departments says, hey, well, the officer that we have wears dreads. Nothing crazy, like nothing. They don't look like hippie. It's well kept, but they're dreads and they're longer. They're longer. Are you okay if he does that? And the academy director was like, no, we have a standard. They have to abide by our standard, or else they can't come to this academy. And they said, okay, I guess they're not coming to your academy. So that department was like, we're going to send them somewhere else. And they kind of, some of their stuff is a little bit more laxed. I don't see anything wrong with it because, again, the style isn't, crazy, but you'll see some of it to where it's like, yeah, some policies are shifting a little bit more to be a little bit more inclusive in the appearances of officers. Yeah.
There was some controversy about I don't know if you saw the post New Orleans attack down there with the FBI lead agent. She had like a nose piercing, and I remember hearing some controversy about that. That was just interesting. All right, ready for lightning round question?
Sure. Let's do it.
All right, most scared you've ever been at work?
Most scared was probably when I thought the city was going to blow up because I
That
wasn't
one
sure
right
if it
there.
was or not. Yeah.
Most dangerous professional mistake?
Probably when I got injured because it was a really dumb decision of going in between two cars, and hindsight's always 2020. And it could have been a bad day for me, and thank God it wasn't.
Did you guys have to shoot that guy, or did he get out of the car and because
The
he ran after you with a lethal weapon?
Yeah, so that's why it was very close that when I said I've never had to discharge a weapon, but it's been very, very close.
Yeah.
That was the time that it was really close. But luckily, because when I got out of the way, how he was boxed in by vehicles, he really wasn't going to be going anywhere. So they were able to pull him out of a busted window before any shots needed to be fired. So no one ended up dying that day, thank God.
In hindsight, do you wish you had fired?
Honestly, no, only for the simple fact of it. I don't think it would have solved anything because if I would have shot and let's say I even connected with him and I ended up ending his life, he still was coming at me. Like it wouldn't have stopped anything. And I did kind of feel a little bit bad for him. He ended up kind of giving me his life story a little bit a couple weeks later. That was another suicide by cop situation. He's like, I didn't
Okay.
want to hurt anybody. I have cancer. I'm homeless. My family's essentially disowned me. I really got nothing to live for. So I was really hoping you guys were just going to kill me. I was like, that's rough.
Biggest leadership mistake?
I think probably the biggest one that I had, which wasn't anything super crazy, but it was just, like, hey guys, if you don't, I was the boss, someone had a drunk driver. I'm like, hey, if you don't think that they're drunk, I'm going to trust you on this. And in the back of my mind, I was like, I think that person's drunk. Come to find out, they got into an accident a little later on out of our jurisdiction. And I'm like, this could be bad. I kind of messed up. I gave them the trust and like, hey, you say that they're not, I'll give you, and I'll drive away. You got two other officers here. Okay, do your thing. I'm going to go check on another guy. And they weren't safe to drive. And I didn't double check on it. And so no one got hurt, thankfully, but it could have been a bad thing. And especially for the officers involved. I mean, again, liability is a crazy thing nowadays.
Something had happened, that could have come back on you then.
Yeah.
Someone had got hurt, right?
Yep.
Wow. Worst job you can imagine.
Working in the jails.
Really?
Yeah, I think that's one of the craziest things because even though they don't have they don't have guns and stuff like that, and it's a contained facility. If you think about it, there's in a cell block, there's probably 60 guys to one correction officer, and sometimes they're just roaming free in there. There's like a little desk in the jail, and the offenders are just roaming free. Now, those are probably the not bad offenders, not violent offenders, but even still, like all it takes is something to happen that I might not have backup. And I've never really liked that feeling. And to me, in law enforcement, I think that's one of the worst jobs you could have.
Yeah, that's so interesting. I built these plans for correctional officers, and I was going to name them, after correctional officers who had been killed in duty. And I started reading some of them stories. I kind of did. I mean, it was too terrible.
Yeah,
Like, I mean, not only they're killed, they're like mutilated. It's like in a situation that block's taken over. Yeah, it was terrible. Dream job. Can't say your
that's a good.
current one.
So, because that's honestly what it was to be in SWAT. I mean, it wasn't necessarily a job, but it was something I wanted to do in my career, and I'm glad I finally achieved that. I haven't really put too much thought into like what I want to do from here on out. I know that when I do finally retire, at least I want to kind of go back into the police academy and do something a little bit more full time with them, you know. But God, dream job. That's a good question. Maybe working federally in one of the federal departments, ICE, not necessarily ICE, but like, ATF, something like that would be at least very interesting. That maybe being like a next step for me.
Best career advice you ever received?
Don't take the job home with you. And even though I've done it a few times, I understand where that person's coming from. Like there's no way you can stop some of the things that we see, but find a good avenue to release that stress and don't take it home. And I think that's probably one of the best advice I've ever gotten.
Do you have a routine when something like that happens, where you stop on the way home or anything like that, or you just deal with it
So I used to
consciously?
live
Go ahead.
right. So I used to live before I just recently moved. I used to live 2 blocks away from work. So it was just a quick, like, I'm in my car and I'm home. And within 2 seconds, I didn't really get that decompression time. Now I've got a little bit of a drive, like 15, 20 minutes. And that's my little bit of a decompression time that's been very helpful for me. But, aside from that, working out has been something that helps out. I know if I don't get a chance to work out on my shift, I'll just say, hey, I'm going to stay a little bit later and give myself an hour to go through it, get out of my funk if I need to, and, go home. Yeah, does it take a little bit of time away from my wife and seeing them? Yes, it does. But I think kind of in the grand scheme of things, I'd rather do that than to bring that baggage home and then potentially unload all of that on my wife, who doesn't deserve that.
Worst career advice?
Drink.
Train?
If you're stressed out, go have a drink after work.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
You received that advice?
It was an older cop, and he's like, that's what I learned. Back in the day, that was kind of the way to do it. To deal with it, was to do that kind of self medication thing. It's never resonated with me. I know some cops and some people like to go after work and maybe go to the bar to get a couple drinks. If I'm going to the bar, maybe one, and I'm done. Like I'm not going to sit there for hours on end to continue to drink. I'll get one drink and I'm like, no, I'm done. I'm good. Because I don't want that to be my crutch.
Have you ever been in a situation where you're wearing civilian clothes and someone recognizes you as a cop and yells at you because what you did to him?
So it's always been a fear. Luckily, I've never had it where they completely recognize me, because usually when they saw me, they were impaired in some way, shape, or form.
Got it.
But I was out to breakfast with my wife, going to pay. Person gets up and goes, "Hey, you look like so and so." I go, "Nope, have no idea what you're talking about." "You look like them." I go, "Nope, I don't know idea what you're talking about." So I got pretty lucky on that, but that's definitely always been a fear.
Do you conceal carry off duty?
I used to, because it was actually in our policy that you were to, so we were covered by our department. They saw that was a lot of liability, and they didn't want to do that anymore. I really don't as much as I used to, because it again, a lot of it comes down to a liability issue, and even if I'm in the right, hey, you were in fear of your life, that could still have, and if I shoot someone and injure them or kill them, that could, even though I might be in the right and I might not be charged criminally for it, they could still come after me civilly, sue me for everything in that I own. I could, lose like those things can still come to haunt me in the end, even though I did the right thing. So it's kind of been a back and forth thing I play with myself. If I'm just going down the street to grab something, probably won't. If I know I'm going somewhere where it probably is a good idea to have one, I might carry.
Your biggest professional regret?
Probably the biggest professional regret was not continuing to focus on my fitness. There's definitely one of the things that, again, when I was younger, I'm like, nope, I'm in shape, I'm good to go. I don't need to do this because I'm still young. And then, I got a couple years into it, and I tried out for SWAT years ago, and I didn't pass it because I couldn't pass one of the physical fitness portions of it. And that was a huge wake-up call for me. I was in a funk for a while, said, screw it, I'm going to give up on it. I'm going to give up on it. Like, what's the point? What's the point? And, I'd work out every once in a while. And I like I said, for a couple of years, I was just a funk. And, it wasn't until he's the commander on the team. He's one of the guys in my department. He's one of our lieutenants. He's like, dude, I'd love to see you on the SWAT team. And I'm like, all right. Like, that put me back into like that motivation, and I kind of stuck with it. So I think the biggest regret is not continuing that fitness routine because of, well, I'm tired. Well, oh, I got hung, I had to hang or come in early because of someone called off. So now I'm out of my routine, and now I'm not going to work out. And then I think that's one of the bigger areas that I fail at sometimes.
Are you a faithful person? Do you go to church? You pray regularly?
So I do go to church regularly. I wouldn't say I'm overly faithful, and I don't think there's anything wrong with it. As a child, went to church.
I'm just trying to see if there's a connect. If something that helps with work.
I think a lot of it, like, I do have faith, but I don't rely on that solely. I used to when I was younger. Kind of grew up, got on my own. Didn't do it as much because, in my line of work, I'm very evidence based. Everything that I do is evidence based.
Interesting.
And so sometimes having that blind faith is a little bit harder for me to do, even especially when I've had faith in other people to do the right thing and they don't do it. And you kind of lose that faith. And so it's been a challenge to get back into that, faithfulness in religion. And what's actually nice is I go to a church that one of our other lieutenants goes to, and he's got a lot more, I would say a lot more faith. He's with it a lot more in the sense. And so I've actually kind of talked to him certain days and relied on him and been like, hey, how does this work for you? What is something that you do? I mean, that's actually been a little helpful. I'm still not maybe at his level in the sense of like, I'm a religious, like every night I'm praying or things like that. But I've tried to understand it a little bit more and put a little bit more of that faith back into what I used to have. Yeah.
There's a couple. I'm not religious myself. I don't know if I'm faithful, but there's a couple real interesting books. One by Viktor Frankl is called Man's Search for Meaning. It's a famous book about he was in the concentration camp in Auschwitz, and then another one is called Confessions of a Fighter Pilot. That's by James Stockdale. He won the Medal of Honor in Vietnam. He was a highest ranking POW in Vietnam, Hanoi Hilton. And then both those books, they have a section where they talk about faith and how faith helped people in those situations. For Stockdale, or no, for Frankel, because what was happening to people there really seemed to have no meaning. What I mean by that is that you could never predict, if you would get killed for no reason, or there was no rhyme to reason to how, so it was really chaotic. And the idea that he had was that the faithful people there, one of the things that faith gave them was the idea that you may not understand what's going on, but it's not random. And that lack of randomness, even though they couldn't see it, understand it, just knowing in that sense some higher being or whatever, it wasn't random what was happening. And I just wonder if some of the things you've seen that I think I would say would be so friggin' random. For example, the child in the car who was killed in the car seat or whatever, not being strapped in. Why that the faithful side might help you come to terms with that. Just an interesting idea. I just don't mean to press you on that. It's just interesting.
No, you're good. I mean, I just in certain things like that, don't. I think mainly because I think it's not fair because I have a and because I can't wrap my head around it. If there is this divine plan, it's very hard for me to wrap my head around why is your plan entail taking the life of this young girl
Right.
who didn't do anything wrong. It was the choice of her mother who decided I'm going to be drunk or I'm going to get high or whatever the case was, and I don't care to take care of my child. And now let's go get into a car crash. Granted, I'm sure she's never like, I want to crash my car today and kill my daughter. I don't think that ever crossed her mind, but
Right.
it's still a choice that she made. And we could all probably realize that, hey, if I'm high or I'm drunk, there's a greater likelihood that I'm going to get into a crash if I drive my car. And so that's sometimes where it's been hard to keep that, like to try to understand that divine plan of like, why could you take someone that was so innocent so early? They didn't get to have a life. So that's kind of where the challenge has been sometimes.
Oh, that's really interesting. As you like put it that way, where actually you can. In other words, it's not fate, right? You
Yeah.
can alter your fate. The idea of fairness is interesting. That's what Stockdale talked about in his book when it comes to faith. He found that especially I think they're all Christian guys in there, and the ones who are more faithful kind of relied on the book of Job or the book of Job, and how this guy, I don't know the exact story. Anyway,
Right.
this guy did everything right, and God kept on hammering him.
Right.
And it came back the idea that life's not fair, and if you try to woe me that life's not fair, it's not fair, and that helped some of those guys in that deal with why they're in that situation.
Right.
Thanks for answering that. All right, last question. What would you tell your 20-year-old self?
Don't give up. I know it sounds kind of corny, but like I said, I always wanted to be on SWAT. I never really had a chance to try out for the team until I did it that first time, and I failed. And had I not given up on my fitness, I might have passed. Had I not given up for a little bit after I, you know, failed and didn't keep going, I could have been on the team a little bit sooner. So, it just because doesn't work out the first time doesn't mean you're done. It isn't that. And it's, a lot of the times when I was younger, I could get in and do things first time. I was good to go. And, once you fail a couple times and you're not really used to it, you're like, oh, well, this is it, that I can't do it again. It's like, no, you can. It's almost that old adage of like, okay, you fall off the horse, get back on it and go. And, it took me a little bit of time to kind of realize that. And wish I would have realized that a little bit sooner, but it's definitely something because I mean, there's been a lot of times where I'd be like, hey, I'd like to go to this school. Nope, we can't afford it. Okay, I guess I won't ask again, you know?
Oh, yeah.
And, for years I couldn't go. And then it's like, screw it, I'll give it a try. Yeah, you can go. All right, cool. So like, don't give up. You might be disappointed for a little bit, but it's not going to be your whole life.
Dave, thanks for this,
Yeah, no problem. Thanks, Rob. I appreciate it.
and we'll talk to you soon.
Yeah, for sure. Can't wait.